The descendants of Ephraim were Shuthelah, Bered, Tahath, Eliada, Tahath. There's two Tahaths? Okay. Zabad, Shuthelah, Ezer, and Eliad. These two were killed trying to steal livestock from the local farmers near Gath. Which two? What? Like, you can't just say these two after listing, like, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different sons. Without context, I would almost assume it was the youngest two, or at least the last two listed. I don't know if they're necessarily the youngest. Usually that's the order it does it in. What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. So, we're looking at 1 Chronicles chapter 7. The whole book thus far has been a rather lengthy genealogy of the people of Israel. You know, up to... It's pretty much meant to... or... It's meant for, I should say, the Israelites who were exiled, perhaps specifically the Babylonian exiles. And the idea of this is just to kind of say, all right, here's where we all came from. Here's kind of how things got to the way they currently are. So, yeah. And I guess as part of that, the genealogy is included more so to establish the history and say, all right, here is, you know, these are our people. This is who and where we came from. And that solidifies your personal connection to what happened and how things went wrong and how we can fix it. We've gone through some of the different tribes of Israel at this point. There were a couple of chapters going up to Jacob, aka Israel. And then there were also a couple of chapters specifically about, like, the Levites in the temple, as well as, like, the succession of the kings and things like that. But now we're kind of knocking out the rest of the tribes of Israel. So here we go. 1 Chronicles 7. The four sons of Issachar were Tola, Puah, Jashub, and Shimron. The sons of Tola were Uzai, Rephaiah, Jeriel, Shammai, Ibsam, and Shemuel. Each of them was the leader of an ancestral clan. At the time of King David, the total number of mighty warriors listed in the records of these clans was 22,600. The sons of Uzai were Izrahiah. The sons of... Sorry, that was only singular there, not plural. I read it as a plural. Sons of Izrahiah were Michael, or more accurately probably Michael, Obadiah, Joel, and Ishiah. These five became the leaders of clans. All of them had many wives and many sons, so the total number of men available for military service among their descendants was 36,000. Okay, so it went from Issachar, mentioned his sons, then went to Tola, then went to his son Uzai. Okay. And then, of course, went to his only son. Seemingly. So, just from the tribe of Issachar and the clans specifically mentioned here, we've got, what, 58,600? Oh, shoot. I should have read the next verse before wrapping up that little section. Oh, well. I think I'll read that and then continue on. Okay, verse 5. The total number of mighty warriors from all the clans of the tribe of Issachar was 87,000. All of them were listed in their genealogical records. So there was another, 20,000-ish among the other clans of Issachar. Anyway, on to verse 6. 3 of Benjamin's sons were Bilhah, Becher, and Jediael. The 5 sons of Bilhah were Ezbon, Uzziel, Jerimoth, and Eri. Each of them was the leader of an ancestral clan. The total number of mighty warriors from these clans was 22,034, as listed in their genealogical records. Which genealogical records, I wonder? Just, it keeps mentioning genealogical records. I mean, yeah, this is kind of a genealogical record. But I guess there might have been... This might be making a reference back to... Numbers? Or one of those books around there in the Bible where it actually lists out the different tribes and clans and how many, warriors, essentially, men fit for battle, that there were amongst each. But anyway, verse 8. Sons of Becher were Zemerah, Joash, Eliezer, Elioenai. I'm trying to pronounce the O and the E there. And anyway, Omri, Jeremoth, Abijah, Anathoth, and Alameth. Each of them was the leader of an ancestral clan. The total number of mighty warriors and leaders from these clans was 20,200, as listed in their genealogical records. Let me just wrap up that section. Son of Jediael was Bilhan. Sons of Bilhan were Jeush, Benjamin, Ehud, Canana? I don't know. Zethan, Tarshish, and Ahishahar. Each of them was the leader of an ancestral clan. From these clans, the total number of mighty warriors ready for war was 17,200. Sons of were Shuppim and Huppim. Hushim was the son of Aher. Okay. And I'm trying to remember... Nope, okay. I was trying to make sense in my head of the, the family tree, essentially, as it's describing it here, but honestly, the way a lot of these are worded, and I would need to focus a little harder and look back and forth a little more to really fully establish that. But anyway, so there's 50,000 warriors from the tribe of Benjamin mentioned here. But alright, there's 2 other tribes of Israel down. Now we'll get to a little more here in verse 13. Sorry, there's, with it being a genealogy, I don't exactly have a ton of thoughts that I feel like I want to add, because, it's a genealogy. There's not much to really break down about all this. This is the breakdown. This is the detailed listing of things. So anyway, moving on to verse 13. Sons of Naphtali were Jaziel, Gunai, Jezer, and Shillem. They were all descendants of Jacob's concubine Bilhah. The descendants of Manasseh through his Aramean concubine included Azrael. She also bore Machir, the father of Gilead. Machir found wives for Huppim and Shuppim. Machir had a sister named Maacah. One of his descendants was Zelophehad, who had only daughters. Machir's wife, Maacah, gave birth to a son whom she named Peresh. His brother's name was Sheresh. Sons of Peresh were Ulam and Rakem. The son of Ulam was Bidan. All these were considered Gileadites, descendants of Machir, son of Manasseh. Machir's sister Hammoleketh gave birth to Ishhod, Abiezer, and Mala. Sons of Shemida were Ahian, Shechem, Likhai, and Anaim. Anaim? I don't know. Okay, so am I to assume that this is the entirety of Manasseh, or like, because I know as they settled in the Promised Land, there was like half the tribe of Manasseh that settled east of the Jordan, and the other half settled west of it. So maybe I don't see any other listing for any part of Manasseh, so I'm just gonna assume, devoid of any other context, this is meant for the whole of them. Unless I'm just forgetting that it mentioned that earlier. If it did mention some earlier, then this is just the other half. If not, then this is presumably all of... Anyway, tangents. So, we got some notes here on a few of the names. It's probably mostly going to get into alternative spellings or pronunciations or things like that. So this is reflecting the parallel text in Genesis 46:24. Hebrew reads Jaziel. I mean, it's a one-letter difference. Come on. Presumably, like, the same name. I don't know. Again, maybe there would be a slightly different meaning to the Hebrew. But, still. If we're just following along the genealogy, then, yes, these people are lining up with whatever was mentioned in any previous genealogies or, you know, sequences of events from previous books in the Bible. It's not like suddenly these people actually had different sons than we thought they did in the previous books. Note there it's Shilem, as in some Hebrew and Greek manuscripts. Most Hebrew manuscripts read Shalom, not Shilem. And that just gives you a little detail on the translation process, and it's like, okay, how are they making sense of this? How are they trying to line things up with other parts of the Bible? Where are they getting these names or words from? Because there's a whole bunch of historical texts that they might draw from for this. Anyway, note there could be read as Machir took a wife from Huppim and Shuppim. Meaning of the Hebrew is uncertain. Which, I mean, they were mentioned up here under the descendants of Benjamin, so, I mean, I suppose it's entirely possible that they went, you know, across tribes and whatnot to, you know, find wives and all that kind of stuff. Now, took a wife from, like, the wording of that could make it sound like he wound up kind of having an affair with, we'll say, or like, I don't know. Like, the woman who wound up being his wife was originally wife of, but it wouldn't be of both Huppim and Shuppim. So, It might be, even with that wording, almost more accurate to say, like, found a wife from them and, like, their family or their descendants or something. I don't know. Also, just brief note, I do remember Zelophehad and his daughters coming up in a previous story just because of them trying to figure out how to settle a land dispute. It was like, well, the land rightfully belonged to their family, but since Zelophehad didn't have any sons, it was like, oh, well, do we give the land to the daughters? We don't really have a rule for this yet, if there isn't a son. But, anyway. So, yeah, some of these names, at least, have some other more detailed stories that would have come up in previous books of the Bible. That's part of how you get all the cross-references and things like that. But, anyway, I digress. Alright. I will move on to verse 20. The descendants of Ephraim were Shuthelah, Bered, Tahath, Eliada, Tahath. There's two Tahaths? Okay. Zabad, Shuthelah, Ezer, and Eliad. These two were killed trying to steal livestock from the local farmers near Gath. Which two? What? Their father Ephraim mourned for them a long time, and his relatives came to comfort him. Afterward, Ephraim slept with his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. Ephraim named him Beriah because of the tragedy his family had suffered. He had a daughter named Shirah. She built the towns of Lower and Upper Beth-horon and Uzen-Shirah. The descendants of Ephraim included Repha, Resheph, Telah, Tahan, Laden, Amihud, Elishama, Nun, and Joshua. Oh, Joshua, yeah. There's kind of a notable figure. Let me finish off the section before I get talking too much about that. The descendants of Ephraim lived in the territory that included Bethel and its surrounding towns to the south, Naran to the east, Gezer and its villages to the west, and Shechem and its surrounding villages to the north, as far as Ayah and its towns. Along the border of Manasseh were the towns of Bethshan, Tanakh, Megiddo, Dor, and their surrounding villages. The descendants of Joseph, son of Israel, lived in these towns. Why would Joseph's sons or descendants been living there? Not totally sure. Maybe we'll get some explanation on that eventually. But, yeah. Joshua, son of Nun. That's that Joshua, you know, that the book is named after in the Bible. He was the one who led the people into the promised land and basically helped them occupy a lot of it. So he was descended from Ephraim. Just kind of wanted to make that connection there. It's which two sons? Like, you can't just say these two after listing, like, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different sons. Without context, I would almost assume it was the youngest two. Or at least the last two listed. I don't know if they're necessarily the youngest. Usually that's the order it does it in. Unless it's stated otherwise. Also, note there at Beriah. Sounds like a Hebrew term meaning tragedy or misfortune. because of the tragedy his family had suffered. Yeah, there we go with the literal naming conventions again. So, I guess the story was mentioned in there about the other sons being killed to help give context and an explanation for Beriah's name. Also, like, 2 Tehats in here. Were they both sons of Ephraim? Or maybe that was, like, Shuthalah was his son, and then Shuthalah's son was Bered, and I don't know. Would be real weird to have 2 Tehats in the same generation, in my opinion. Or just 2 of the same name in general in the same generation. Like, especially having the same father. But that's just me, in my opinion. Note there, Beth Shan. Hebrew might say Beth Shean. Close enough with the spelling. And it gives a note there at Israel because technically it's referring to Jacob, the person who was then renamed Israel after wrestling with God. As opposed to, you know, the nation or broader people group of Israel. Okay. Moving on to verse 30. Looks like this is the last section we got here for this chapter. Sons of Asher were Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, and Beriah. They had a sister named Sarah. Sons of Beriah were Heber and Malchiel, father of Berzaith. Sons of Heber were Japhlet, Shomer, and Hotham. They had a sister named Shua. Sons of Japhlet were Pesach, Bimhal, and Ashvath. Sons of Shomer were Ahai, Roga, Huba, and Aram. Sons of his brother Helem were Zophah, Imnah, Shelesh, and Amal. Sons of Zophah were Sua. I almost added an extra H in there. Sua, Harnifer, Shual, Berai, Imrah, Bezer, Hod, Shema, Shilsha, Ithran, and Bera. Sons of Jether were Jephannah, Pispah, and Era. Sons of Ulah were Era, Hanael, and Riziah. Each of these descendants of Asher was the head of an ancestral clan. They were all select men, mighty warriors, and outstanding leaders. Total number of men available for military service was 26,000, as listed in their genealogical records. Now, okay, there was some Aram. I'm like, are we talking that Aram? As in the Arameans who, like, continually fought with the Israelites throughout the time of the kings? I mean, I guess it's possible for a, you know, branch of a clan of Israel to, like, get so distant in... get so, like, I guess, theologically or ideologically distant from the other tribes and clans that they pretty much become a totally different subgroup of people. Not necessarily too different from how, you know, like, Israel and Judah wound up splitting and becoming separate kingdoms. But I don't know if that's actually the case. It could be a different Aram. See, now a lot of this section is broken down in a very understandable way. So it's like you've got sons of Asher by these names. Then it's one of those sons that it mentions his sons. Then it takes one of those sons and mentions his sons. But it maybe doesn't keep up with that all the way through. I wish it would do that all the time. And if it's got some other branch off somewhere else, that it would, mention it maybe within the generation to which it applies. And then that would maybe help a little bit more with keeping it all straight as far as what the family tree would look like. But anyway, okay, we got a couple of notes to look at for probably name, meanings, and translations and such. Sons of Shomer, his brother. See, okay, that's actually, yeah. So it went Japhlet there, who was Heber's son, and then it also mentioned Shomer, who was one of Heber's sons. Okay, so that actually makes sense of some things there. But then where does Helem come from? Possibly another name for Hotham, which would have been another one of the brothers. Okay. Well, another one of the brothers who were sons of Heber. And then it gets to Zophah and his sons. Ithran says possibly another name for Jether. Compared to 738. Oh, okay. That still doesn't explain where Ulah's coming in the mix. Because if that's actually Jether, and Jether is here in the next verse, then okay. That was continuing off of Zophah. But where is Ulah mentioned? This is the stuff that confuses me and it makes it more complicated trying to envision the connections and the whole family tree kind of thing. Anyway. Okay, well, we got through, 1, 2, 3, 4, technically 5, no, 6. Jeez, that's like half the tribes of Israel right there in one chapter. Okay, so we actually got through a bunch of the tribes of Israel there. I think like half of them, pretty much. And by my count, we only have one left. So, next chapter should be the end of that part of the genealogy, at least. But anyway, we're getting there. As always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell to get updates when I post new videos. Look down in the description for links to social media pages, including Discord server, supporter page, and all sorts of good stuff like that. And leave your thoughts and questions down in the comments section below all that. So that's going to do it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. Whatever the case is, until next time, stay cool, people.